this isn't about the alleged affair at all.
It's not at all.
That's the background. What it is the cover-up and how it was covered up and what it was done to try and defraud the election in 2016. You have to remember there was this storm of controversy right before because of that Access Hollywood tape that leaked 2 weeks before the election happened. And then they had the Stormy Daniels story swirling in the background, and they needed that to not get out. And that is what the jury heard during these 22 days. And they had to corroborate through witness testimony, not just Michael Cohen, who was kind of the ringleader here, but they needed the people in the background and who helped facilitate this, because there was no concrete evidence saying that former President Trump knew about these books that were being cooked. But it was the men behind the scenes that were doing it and ultimately did it to defraud voters.
Anybody out there who thinks that this was about the salacious, juicy details that Stormy Daniels laid out and this was about a former president having an affair, what it was about was bookkeeping. It was about numbers. It was about clerical work. It was about recording payments. And that, the nitty-gritty, small, boring, for lack of a better word, transactions that led to these charges of falsifying business records. It was not about hush money payments to the porn star per se, because that in itself is not illegal.
And you know how the prosecution connect the dots here? They really painted a picture of what Donald Trump was like and how he ran his businesses behind the scenes. 40 years behind the Trump organization, they said this man knew how much they paid for light bulbs.
He nickel and dimed it, they said. And then suddenly we were supposed to believe, at least the defense was saying we're supposed to believe that he suddenly didn't care. The prosecution saying that he suddenly didn't micromanage his business. Exactly.
He knew everything that was going on, and that is what the jury really had to accept in the end, that he wasn't a third party to all of this who was blindfolded. This was someone that was actively engaged in this criminal conspiracy, and ultimately that's what they found today as he walked out of this courthouse, a convicted felon on 34 counts. And you can
take a quick look behind us.
Right,
we'll set the stage. It's basically the court officers have walked away. They got a big hand from people when they walked off. NYPD has stacked the barricades. You can see them walking into the frame right now. Court officers left about 20 minutes ago.
This is NYPD.
NYPD walking into the shot right now. The players have gone home. Donald Trump, Mr. Trump.
I have to give kudos to these court officers.
Oh gosh, yes.
Because they were running the show behind the scenes. Yeah, the Secret Service is with Donald Trump every day, and they protect him outside of this building. But inside, it was these court officers that had this carefully choreographed, and they were ushering him in and out of this building and making sure that security was tight as a drum. Even us as reporters, we went through 2 sets of security, bag searches. It was TSA-style screening, essentially, as we went in and out every day. And that shows you the gravity of all of this. This was a former president of the United States.
The crowd is dispersing in Foley Square. We're kind of hemmed in, so we can't show you, but they are gone. Behind us is a park. It was full of supporters, Biden supporters and Trump supporters earlier in the day. A few people milling around, but really it is twilight here, and this day will soon fade into history.
It's remarkable, the day that we just had, how we thought we were going home at 4:30.
I was packing up. I was literally packing up. I said, oh my goodness. The
judge told us in the courtroom, I'm going to go send the jury home. And at that second, I think he was slipped a note. He said, I've got to go. I'll be right back. And then time started to build, and it was 15 minutes. And so I was sitting next to him. He told me, this isn't normal. Something's going on. And finally, when the judge came back, he said, I got a note at 4:20, and the jury has reached that verdict. And literally, there was a audible gasp in the courtroom. I can imagine.
I gasped out here. For anybody who's just tuning in now, maybe got home late from work, take us back to that courtroom. When 34 guilties came out of the mouths of
the foreperson,
what was the expression on Donald Trump's face?
You know, he's been pretty stoic throughout this entire trial. I see him walking back and forth every single day. He has the same exact look on his face, expressionless, really, sort of annoyed. Why do I have to be here? But when this came down, I'm sure that the air was really sucked out of the room, and he felt the gravity of all of this. No matter how defiant you are, to be labeled a convicted felon in your home state and the city where you were born has to be really powerful and something that you have to let sink in. And he did that, I saw, when he greeted his son. They locked eyes for the first time after this verdict as they were leaving. And his son, Eric, was the only family member there. Melania Trump was not here through the entire thing. Neither was Ivanka. She was the only child, aside from Barron, who didn't show up. And they gave each other this look, kind of like this lump in your throat look, and shook hands. And it looked like they almost wanted to embrace, but they kept it sort of cordial. But yeah, it was a deep moment.
We're on a roll. Let's keep going. The judge set sentencing day for July 11th. We heard DA Alvin Bragg talk about, he was asked at least 3 times, will there be any jail time? Will you be asking for any jail time? And he basically said, we're not getting into that. Look at the court filings.
So this date is key. It's July 11th, and this is 4 days before the RNC convenes. So clearly a lot is at stake. And he also has to be in Florida for another criminal court case. That is why they asked the sentencing to be in July. So he's got a lot on his plate legally still has 3 outstanding trials that he has to sit through, presumably. And so the first will obviously come on July 11th when we hear about sentencing. Each one of these 34 counts comes with a maximum penalty of 4 years in state prison. It's not expected, no matter who you hear from. There will be lots of speculation, but because of his background, because of who he is, because this is a white-collar crime, because he doesn't have a criminal history, who could see this judge putting him behind bars? It's not conceivable.
If it happened, could it be even sending a message a few weeks, a few months? Could it be home confinement? Could there be some kind of teeth? Or will it just be parole? That's what we're going to have to wait and see.
Legal experts, and they believe that it will be some sort of probation and possibly some restitution to pay back the state for all the costs associated with having this trial.
You'd have to think they're going to look for something besides probation, but that'll remain to be seen. July 11th. Going forward, let's talk really about this. The fact that this case will be appealed by Mr. Trump's attorneys. And the fact that, probably pending those appeals, it's very possible that even if there were a sentence for some kind of incarceration, it's very possible that that could be put off until all appeals are heard. And appeals could go months. They could go years. It's very likely it would go after the November election.
There have been so many motions filed by the defense, especially for a mistrial throughout the course of these 5 weeks, and the judge has struck every single one of them down. So I can't see sentencing being derailed at all. But one point that head attorney Todd Blanche brought up today as soon as the jury left, and he said that he thought that there's no way the jury could have rendered this verdict with the testimony of Michael Cohen, who is a convicted liar, as they like to say.
Yeah, but disbarred.
And that's the point that they're likely going to seize on for an appeal. But, they have gone over this over and over and over in the court throughout the course of this trial, and every single time they said Michael Cohen's testimony is not what should hinge on Donald Trump's fate. It's about the other corroborating testimony you heard, and there were 20 witnesses that were paraded into that courtroom throughout this trial that they believe did that, especially David Pecker, the former tabloid king.
Let's talk about some of the politics here. I mentioned earlier, we've talked about a lot of things. We have to repeat some of them. But recent polls have showed that among Republicans, registered Republicans, 1 in 4 said prior to the conviction today that if he were convicted, they wouldn't vote for him. 60% in a registered poll of undecided voters said that if former President Trump were to be convicted, they would not vote for him. in swing states in such a close election, you really got to think that this could play far beyond the court of law.
Yeah, those, 7 swing states that there are, something like that. It's certainly going to play on the minds of voters. There are going to be people who really don't care about this. That's his base, obviously, who he can do really no wrong. Those are most of the people we saw last week up in the Bronx at that political rally that he held. But certainly not in New York can we expect anything to change in the minds of voters here. This is a blue state. It hasn't been since 1924, I think, since the city went for a Republican in office. So here in New York, I think he still hasn't won anybody over.